Hello and welcome to the viewers of this video. This is the Orange Fan here, bringing you another entry for the episode Recap and Thoughts category. This video will be dedicated to episode 10 of Young Justice, Targets. We begin this episode in Taipei on September 7th, where Cad Grant reports news that the peace summit between North Rhelasia and South Rhelasia will be held in Taipei. She also mentions that the leaders of the two Rhelasias have agreed to bring in an independent arbiter, although the public does not seem to be aware of who this independent arbiter will be. Red Arrow is also present, and he contacts Aqualad requesting use of the Justice League computers to find information regarding the League of Shadows member, Cheshire. Aqualad does provide the information, specifically Cheshire's height, and he does offer to lend Red Arrow some help, but Red Arrow declines the help, saying he doesn't need help from the Junior Justice League, as he puts it, although Aqualad comments how he did want use of their computers. Red Arrow does manage to find someone who matches Cheshire's height, and true enough, it is Cheshire undercover. Aqualad does wish Red Arrow the best of luck on his mission before their communication is ended. And Red Arrow does manage to successfully stop Cheshire from carrying out her objective, and Cheshire is captured and brought to prison. And the independent arbiter's identity is revealed to be none other than Lex Luthor. And Lex Luthor actually vouches for Red Arrow, but Red Arrow still is very suspicious of Lex Luthor. And he's not too happy when he finds out that Lex Luthor plans to profit from the Peace Summit, but he still agrees to investigate the situation all the same. When we're at Mount Justice, we cut back to Mount Justice, where Superboy is working on a motorcycle-looking vehicle, and we do see that the Sphere has indeed returned to Mount Justice with them, or it decided to go to Mount Justice with them. Miss Martian, Aqualad, Martian Manhunter, and Red Tornado also arrive. It turns out the school system in Happy Harbor has its first day of school today. And Superboy and Miss Martian will be attending the Happy Harbor High School. Miss Martian reveals her human disguise and will be going by the human name of Megan Morse. And they point out Martian Manhunter reveals his human disguise, and his human name is John Jones. And he even mentions that he suggested to Red Tornado that he go by the human name John Smith. And Martian Manhunter tries to encourage Superboy to join the John Club, but Superboy declines the offer. Miss Martian makes the suggestion that he go by Connor, and Superboy is cool with that, though Aqualad points out that he'll need a last name as well. Martian Manhunter suggests Kent, of course in reference to Superman's Earth civilian name Clark Kent, although Miss Martian mistakes it as a tribute to Kent Nelson, who they met back in Denial. And Martian Manhunter's response is, sure, let's go with that. And Miss Martian also tells Superboy that he'll need to wear a different shirt because she thinks that him wearing the shirt with the Superman crest on it will expose his secret identity. But Superboy decides to just turn his shirt inside out instead. That's his suggestion before they head off to school. But before that, we cut back to Taipei, where Red Arrow is trying to interrogate Cheshire, although her answers are not exactly helpful, and she quickly changes the subject to talk about the Young Justice team, particularly Archery Girl. Soon enough, though, someone arrives to break Cheshire out of prison, and it turns out to be Sportsmaster. Cheshire seems to know Sportsmaster because she's not too happy that he's the one to free her. Sportsmaster returns the sentiments by referring to Cheshire as little girl and bringing up the old saying about how beggars can't be choosers. They escape by helicopter, and Red Arrow chases after them. He also shoots an arrow at the helicopter that has rope on it, so I guess you could say he's kind of using it like a grappling hook, I guess you could call it. And eventually, though, Cheshire does cut the cord, so Red Arrow can't follow them. But what they don't realize is that the arrow that's still in the helicopter, that's actually a tracking device, and that's how Red Arrow is able to follow them. And he sees that Cheshire and Sportsmaster are meeting the leader of the League of Shadows himself, Ra's al Ghul. Ra's al Ghul, though, notices Red Arrow watching them, and he brings Red Arrow's presence to Sportsmaster and Cheshire's attention. So they proceed to fight Red Arrow. And at one point, Sportsmaster refers to Red Arrow as Broken Arrow. But then we cut back to Happy Harbor, where Superboy and Miss Martian have arrived on the high school grounds. And then Superboy sees a boy, Marvin, wearing a shirt that has a superhero logo on it. So he actually picks up Marvin and questions him about it. But then this gets the attention of some of the other high school students, one of them being Mal Duncan, who seems to think that Superboy is planning to bring harm to Marvin. Although Superboy is more bothered by the fact that most of the students are wearing shirts that have superhero logos on them, but he begrudgingly says everyone's shirts are fine. And while it looks like a fight's about to break out between Superboy and Mal, they're stopped by their homeroom teacher, Lucas Snapper Carr, who's voiced by Greg Weisman himself. And so they all go into the high school to begin the school day. And then we cut back to Taipei, where Red Arrow is still fighting Cheshire and Sportsmaster. And eventually they do knock him into a body of water. He's able to pull himself out of it, though, and he contacts Aqualad, admitting that he does need some help. But he then goes to meet Lex Luthor and Lex's assistant, Mercy Graves, to let him know about Ra's al Ghul. And Lex admits that he and Ra's don't exactly get along with each other. And he figures that the League of Shadows are still going to try and put a stop to the Peace Summit, so they'll have to increase security. Although he also mentions that since the League of Shadows think that they've defeated Red Arrow, his arrival there could be used as an element of surprise in their favor. But Red Arrow seems to have something else in mind for the element of surprise. Back at the Happy Harbor High School, Snapper is showing a video of Cat Grant's news report regarding the Peace Summit, and questions his students if any of them know about what they know about the Rhelasias. And Superboy recites some history of the Rhelasias thanks to the education he received from the Genomorphs at Cadmus, but he still doesn't understand why Rhelasians would be fighting each other. Telepathically, Miss Martian says that it brings to mind something from Mars, where the white Martians are treated poorly compared to the green Martians, or at least some of the green Martians treats the white Martians poorly. And she insists that while she's a green Martian, she still thinks it's wrong that some of the green Martians treat the white Martians poorly. Now, back at the Peace Summit, it's finally going. They're finally going along with the Peace Summit, and we see that Cheshire is in disguise, because they think that she's preparing a tea ceremony, but of course she's actually trying to put a stop to the peace summit. But then Aqualad reveals that he arrived in Taipei and he stops Cheshire, or rather, he exposes Cheshire's. He blows Cheshire's cover. So, yeah, Cheshire decides a more obvious means of carrying out her objective. And we see that she has backup. Sportsmaster and several minor minions are also there to help her out. Red Arrow insists on taking on Cheshire himself and tells Aqualad that he can take care of Sportsmaster. And the security force present take care of the minor minions. Naturally, a lot of people are panicking while this fight is going on, but Lex Luthor remains calm during the fight. Back at Happy Harbor, it seems like the school day is over, but Miss Martian is sticking around to try out for the cheerleader team, the Bumblebees. Eventually, the other cheerleaders present, they pour a bucket of water over her, and Superboy does not like this, but Miss Martian telepathically tells him not to try anything regretful, we'll say. So Superboy ends up stumbling down the bleachers, but he's Superboy, so it doesn't really hurt him all that much. It turns out the pouring water on her was actually an initiation test, although one of the cheerleaders, Wendy, remarks that she wishes that they would stop with the initiation test. So Miss Martian actually passed, and that's good. And afterwards, Superboy offers Miss Martian his jacket, and he carries her books for her. Though he gives the simple reason, you don't want your books to get wet. But Miss Martian appreciates the gesture all the same. So back in Taipei, the fight's still going. The fight's still continuing, and Sportsmaster reveals to Aqualad that he has a very inside source. And so Red Arrow and Aqualad work together to try and finish the fight as quickly as they can. Red Arrow shoots the sprinkler system so that it'll go off, and Aqualad uses the water there to turn it into He turns the water into the shape of a dragon. It looks like a water dragon. It's a pretty cool design, I have to admit. Although Cheshire and Sportsmaster managed to escape. While most of the minor minions have been defeated, one of them tries one last attack, but Mercy reveals that in this adaptation, she's a cyborg because one of her arms is mechanized and it shoots a laser at this minor minion. This impresses both the Rhelasia leaders, and they very much agree to the peace summit, and they want some of the technology that Lex Luthor's company provided after seeing Mercy's cybernetic laser. Red Arrow isn't happy about how Lex Luthor is profiting from this still, but Aqualad did say that they took part in this mission for the sake of peace. And afterwards, Red Arrow tells Aqualad he heard what Sportsmaster said about a mole being that there's a mole, and he questions what Aqualad plans to do about this. Aqualad says he'll investigate it, but he'll investigate it quietly, because if this turns out to be a lie Sportsmaster said to scare him, then he doesn't want his team members to panic or for the team to unravel on a baseless rumor. But on the other hand, if what Sportsmaster said is true, he doesn't want to tip the mole off that he's aware of their presence. And Aqualad also questions why Red Arrow called him for help instead of the Justice League or Green Arrow in particular. Red Arrow admits that the Young Justice team has earned his respect, and he says he's willing to help them out if they ever need his help. And then later on still, we see Lex Luthor is talking to someone about how their plan succeeded, and this someone turns out to be Ra's al Ghul, meaning that they both were in on this, and they were working together on this peace summit idea. And the episode ends with them toasting while talking about how another part of Earth has seen the light. Now, like I mentioned in the previous discussion, or the discussion for the previous episode, this episode gave the spotlight to a character who isn't currently part of the Unjustice team, and that was Red Arrow, although Aqualad did eventually get to help Red Arrow out. And I liked it. That was a nice touch. It was good to see that even though the show is mostly about the team of young heroes, it is nice to see that they're willing to give some attention to some other characters as well. Granted, Red Arrow would still be considered one of the sidekicks, although he doesn't like to be called a sidekick. But you get what I'm saying. So it still goes with that idea of following along with the younger heroes, but still, it was cool to focus on someone who wasn't a part of the team, especially because, yeah, Red Arrow was one of the 4 initial sidekick characters. And I like that because this helps to show more of Red Arrow's good qualities, and it's nice to remind everyone that even though Red Arrow can be a bit rough around the edges, admittedly, he still is a good person at heart. And it was nice to see that at the end of the episode, he admitted that the Unjustice team has earned his respect, and he's willing to help them out whenever they need it. So that goes to show that he is a good guy who really does care about his friends at heart, even if he can come off as a little harsh or not always the most personable of individuals. Now, we also get to see Lex Luthor and Ra's al Ghul, 2 major villains. Lex Luthor is Superman's archenemy, and Ra's al Ghul is one of Batman's notorious enemies as well. And, the funny thing about those 2 characters in particular is there's a lot of pronunciation debates regarding their names. Like, there's Ra's al Ghul versus Ra's al Ghul, and there's Lex Luthor versus Lex Luthor. Now, at Young Justice, the TV show Young Justice, they went with the Ra's al Ghul pronunciation, and they actually went with the Lex Luthor pronunciation. It turns out that was the pronunciation that Greg Weisman grew up with, so that's why they went with that. Personally, I'm more used to the Lex Luthor pronunciation, so that's the pronunciation I'll be using. Because I mentioned this before, particularly with my terminology of the channel category, but I'm not really a stickler over pronunciations. And, thanks to a lot of language classes that I took, or language acquisition, or how people develop language, those classes had taught us under the belief that there's really not a right or wrong way to pronounce things, or not a right or wrong dialect. It's just like different dialects may result in different pronunciations and what have you. Now, please don't misunderstand me. I'll still pronounce a real life person's name the way they would pronounce it, as long as I'm aware of how they pronounce it. But I think that there are certain things that it doesn't really matter how you pronounce it, or you don't have to be so strict about pronunciation. Like, I would say fictional characters like Ra's al Ghul and Lex Luthor are examples where you don't have to be such a stickler for pronunciation. And, well, if you've seen other videos on my channel, you're aware of my status of covering the Dragon Ball franchise, where there's a lot of pronunciation debates there too. Goku versus Goku, Namek versus Namek, there's Cybermen versus Cybermen. It's like, yeah, and that's not just for characters, even like places, races, species. It's like, yeah, it's a whole big debate. But like I said, I mean, I think as long as we all know what we're talking about, it's a live with let live. Like, I won't jump on anyone's case, or I won't antagonize someone for their pronunciation, even if I find it awkward, but I just ask that I not be antagonized as well. But there you go. I thought this was overall, I thought this was a good episode overall. It was nice to get some focus on Red Arrow, and I did like seeing Superboy and Miss Martian's first day of school. I thought that was a nice touch too. And otherwise, yeah, I thought this was... Oh, there are some important things in this episode that do happen later on. Like, we do get some important details here, like Aqualad and Red Arrow are aware of a mole on the hero's side, but there's some more important details that'll be revealed in the future, and we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. But there we go for episode 10 of Young Justice on this channel. Take care, and until next time.